everyone, this is Anja from Plastisphere Podcast. I have a special recording for you. A few days ago, the Scientists Coalition for an Effective Plastics Treaty held an event here in Busan, South Korea, where the negotiations are taking place towards the Global Plastics Treaty. And it was a really, really great presentation and discussion and overview of what the Scientists Coalition is and does, and also about some of the agreed insights that we have on plastic pollution. Knowledge that is agreed upon by the scientists. So yeah, here's the recording for everyone who missed it. Enjoy.
We have great experts with us, both members of the Scientists Coalition and external guests. And we are very honored to have the Permanent Secretary of the Environment and Climate Change of Fiji with us, Dr. Sivendra Michael. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. And we would like to kick off with taking us back to where we started, when the negotiations started and when the Scientists Coalition started. And to help us with that, we were going to invite some panelists up to join us on the podium. So if we can have Tricia, the Permanent Secretary, Dr. Conrad Sparks, and Ricardo Fieber to join us. Thank you so much, and it's so good to see so many people in here. This room was so cold a couple of hours ago. I think it's going to be very hot when we finish with all these people. I want to kick off by going to you, Tricia. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the first UN meeting on plastics that you went to, what your expectations were, how it was, and what your ambitions were when you were aiming to set up the Scientists Coalition.
Thank you, and kia ora koutou everybody. It's just wonderful to see so many people here. Short notice, but really excited to see so many of you who have supported us up to this point and who are interested in continuing to support the science to support negotiators through the treaty negotiations, but also beyond that and through the implementation phase of the treaty. So thank you for your question, Christopher. So I guess I started in this process back in 2017 at UNEA 3 in Nairobi. That was my first experience. It was overwhelming, so I really feel for some of our new scientists who have joined us right here at this point in the processes at INC 5. We know how overwhelming it is. I think it's probably particularly overwhelming here. I was invited to join the expert group on marine litter and microplastics soon after that, and then joined the Scientific Advisory Committee on Marine Litter and Microplastics. So I've been involved in this since UNEA 3 and have been to all of the meetings. My expectations back then were very low. I didn't really know what on the earth was going on. And then my expectations and ambition grew and grew as I was figuring out what was happening. But also I had to measure my expectations as well, and that was quite difficult. It still is. So I think that is if I answered those questions. And how did we start? Is that, yeah? Is that the question you're asking, also how we started? Yeah. So I guess we've kind of actually started, we all have our origin stories, but we're sort of bubbling away, talking about the need for independent, robust science from very early on, right through the UNEA process, actually, before INC 1. But the Scientists Coalition formed just at INC 1. We had a declaration which was broader than the Scientists Coalition. And there was a lot of conversations around the table about the need for independent science, because we'd seen a fair bit of and disinformation of the science coming from a range of different sources. But we were particularly concerned about the science that was coming from vested interests, from the those with interests in petrochem and plastics. And so the Scientists Coalition really coalesced around that need.
Thank you, Tricia.
I think we can say that you have done a really good job in creating and stimulating scientists to join this coalition. So today we have almost 430 members from 160 countries. I think it's a great achievement. What do you think could be like some of the key aspects to this success?
I think the key aspects is that, A, we get along really well. People always ask us, you must have so much, sort of contested science and trying to wrangle us all together to lead us in the same ambitious direction. And I have to say, I am still to this day shocked that we don't. We actually have our key messaging, we have, our key underlying principles. As you'll all see in our outputs, we are generally in very clear agreement about what is needed because the science is telling us what's needed. The science is ambitious and it's reflected in our outputs and it's reflected in the way that we've come together on this. So I think that's one really key part of why we've been so successful. I think we've got experts around within our group also that are very good at communicating the science. And Justin Boucher and Food Packaging Forum have been helping us communicate the science really clearly. Social media in a whole range of different manner has meant that those who have no understanding or did not have any understanding of the science of plastics may not know everything, but they're certainly very clear on some of the key messages. And so the member states that we have good relationships with, it makes it easier for us to be able to convey those key messages and priorities at specific points along the way. So we're very responsive, I think, is another part of why we're successful, I think.
Thank you, Tricia. And Permanent Secretary Michael, we recognize that there is a lot of stake for the nation that you represent here in Busan. So we appreciate very much that you're joining us this afternoon. And we were wondering if you could share with us what would be the dream scenario, what would be your preferred outcomes of our meetings and our days here in Busan?
Thank you for the question. I think for us, the dream scenario would be a treaty with global obligations that address the full life cycle of the plastic. It was really difficult for us at INC4, and I know that many people recognized small island developing states for speaking out to how the intersessional work program was being arranged, and we continuously called for both production and consumption, as well as recognizing that the extraction industry plays such a big role that there needs to be measures that will be addressing those obligations as well. We also I'm sure you would have read the Article 6 proposal that we have just submitted. We want a time-bound reduction target for primary plastic polymers in line with the 1.5 degree goal. Many of you know that the 1.5 degree ambition in the Paris Agreement itself was a very big push from Pacific Island leaders. And so just to recognize the fact that the obligations must stress the time-bound, so we are calling for a 40% reduction by 2040. I think not only us, many countries that are not producers of plastic are calling for the elimination of polymers and chemicals of concern. There is quite an exhaustive list right now. We know that some of them are not properly disclosed to users or consumers, and so we need really a strong push for the elimination. I also believe in tandem to that, there should be a very big discussion or reflection within the treaty text on the principles of enhanced transparency, monitoring and reporting across the life cycle. This is important because we see this underplayed in climate change, in biodiversity and so forth, so we cannot make the same mistakes in the plastic treaty, and I think this treaty deserves its special space, and it's one that we can have enhanced transparency. The last one, which I think is the core of this entire treaty, is that it needs an ambitious financial mechanism that actually lives up to the ambitions of small and developing states in particular, and recognizes the special circumstances of SIDS and LDCs. We must continuously acknowledge that at the heart of the discussions that's happening now, and if you would have seen the third chair's non-paper, there was no treaty language on Article 11 of the convention, and we Fiji, along with Africa Group, despite our differences, were one of the first few countries that actually made the submission because we wanted to start with negotiations and stop with the procedural niceties. I think we are done with that. We want constructive engagement, and the financial mechanism is at the heart of how we're going to implement, what are the instruments we need to look at, and what do you mean by innovative sources. We need to see unpack and clearly outline the definitions of the financial sources that we are going to be leveraging.
Thank you so much, and I think that many of those points very much align with the policy briefs that the Scientist Coalition has been preparing over the last couple of years, and we have very much appreciated in the Scientist Coalition to work with Fiji and your neighboring nations in this process. I was wondering if you could share with us a little bit about how you see that science should inform the negotiations and the treaty, and maybe briefly about how you work with other nations as well to make sure that the decisions are science-based.
Thank you. I would like to start by acknowledging that we have absolutely no doubt that we need a treaty that is based on the best available science, including that of traditional knowledge as well. Scientific assessments should be not only the basis, but it offers a very valuable tool in strengthening the treaty over time. We have many times in our intervention recognized that the science horizon is changing and the knowledge base is expanding. So it is critical that every one of the scientists in this very room plays a very critical part in the treaty responsive to the best available science. I think yesterday's intervention we said that a treaty that is not sensitized to the best available science is a treaty that is dead in the water. I think that's really important for us to acknowledge, and a treaty that is not responsive to the best available science is not a living treaty. These are two messaging that we continuously speak about, and we also intend to recognize the traditional knowledge systems. About a month ago, I would like to acknowledge that Fiji hosted its first ever National Symposium on Plastic Pollution. We were so honored to have Dr. Tricia there with us, and whose voice in the room really provided these science-based interventions that allowed key national stakeholders to understand the magnitude of the challenge, to talk to the industry in that way, the one that really very much wants to make the change but does not produce that information, and to give them the sciences behind it. Because I also believe that sometimes the industry that's using the plastic is also not that aware. And so when we held this meeting, it was making them come around to try and have these very genuine conversations that we had. And the outcomes of the symposium will really allow even our relevant ministers that have very little engagement with the processes and things that we want to progress, to really make very informed decisions in developing the policies that can really end the plastic pollution crisis at the national level. We hope that in future we'll be hosting similar forums, and we will welcome the Scientific Coalition to be present again. And all of you are welcome to come to Fiji, to our beautiful country, and also not only experience the paradise, but see the magnitude of the crisis that we have to deal with. Back home, we only have one waste landfill and a lot of illegal waste dump sites where plastic is a big problem. I'm not sure if you saw the Time magazine where one of the waste speakers was burning, like there was a fire at the back of her and she was carrying all the plastic waste, and that sends a message home that the urgency of this issue really needs to be grounded of the best available science.
Thank you, Dr. Mark, for wise and kind words. I think we all in Science Coalition are very happy with the relationship that the Science Coalition established with Fiji and other Pacific islands, and it's definitely a two-way partnership. Turning to you, Conrad, you are the director of the Center for Sustainable Oceans at the Cape Peninsula University of Technology in South Africa. You are also a member of the steering committee after a year of a formal member. Could you tell us a little bit about your motivation of joining the Science Coalition?
Thank you very much. I was doing research on microplastics and plastics, and I couldn't find much information about Africa. And I, at the same time, also wanted to see what's happening in the other parts of the globe. And coming across the Scientist Coalition, I thought it would be a good platform to engage with like-minded scientists about plastics in other parts of the world, thinking I can use the platform to connect with colleagues across Africa. when I joined, I realized that there's not that many colleagues across Africa. And I then joined, and I think the plan and vision is to connect colleagues across Africa to join the Scientist Coalition and share our research and sciences about plastics. So there's a hidden, it's not so hidden anymore, but the plan is to use the coalition to bring others into the coalition.
Thank you, Conrad. And our steering committee is elected and with representatives from different UN regions. And you're representing a region where the implementation of the Global Plastics Treaty will be very important and I think also a little challenging. So could you say a little bit about how you see that science and maybe even the Scientist Coalition can support that implementation across Africa?
I think we're all aware of the challenges relating to plastics in Africa and the magnitude of it. And it involves not only the waste but the entire life cycle of plastics. And as African scientists, I think it's important for us to contextualize the challenges and address science at the local and I think regional levels. And something I'm thinking about more recently is we often publish papers which communities don't know. And I think a strategy would be for us to take the science and to engage communities, because we are doing the science for our communities. And I think the scientists across Africa can come together and present our research using also indigenous knowledge, which is vital across the African continent, and bring that together to share our concerns to our governments to implement the treaty.
Thank you, and thank you to all the panelists for being very clear. We appreciate that. I want to turn to Ricardo. You joined the Scientist Coalition about a year ago, and yesterday I overheard you having a very interesting discussion with a representative of business here at INC5. I think you learned quite a lot. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your field of research and why you decided to join the Scientist Coalition.
Yeah, thank you, Christopher, for asking the question, and thanks everyone for being here and engaging with us and listening to us. So my name is Ricarda, and I'm a PhD student at ETH Zurich, and I studied industrial engineering with a focus on materials, and then looked a lot into sustainability and also the sustainable resource management, more towards the end of my master's. And a principle I've picked up throughout my studies is question the status quo, which is, I think, a principle we as scientists are living, and which is also a bit of my intrinsic motivation, seeing where we are also transitioning. And so my research right now is very interdisciplinary. So I am connecting the science perspective, but I'm also considering what perspectives are the policymakers coming from, what perspectives is industry coming from, and how can we communicate science effectively to be understood, because our job is to provide reliable information. And trust me, we are the ones criticizing ourselves the most. We're every day asking ourselves, is this correct? Oh no, and I think this is also coming back to our group. We get along because we are, rather than pushing an opinion through, we are trying to understand other positions, and by understanding others, and this is our goal on how we can then try to further understand where we're at. And I think this is also something that is the second principle, try to understand and being understood. And then coming back to Christopher, your aspect with when I had a conversation with someone from business. I really enjoy engaging with everyone and seeing different perspectives, and it's oftentimes scientific principles are not understood, and I think we have to think interdisciplinary, and I think we have to communicate the science, and we're always happy if you come to us and ask, and we are every day questioning the status quo, looking into different disciplines from social science to natural science, political science. Everything is there, and if you have any questions of any field, please come towards us and ask.
Thank you, Ricardo. I think that's kind of attitude that is very beneficial here at the Global Plastics Treaty, but it's certainly not easy one to try to be interdisciplinary, to listen to others, to communicate, and most of, basically all of our job, our work here at the Science Coalition is in a voluntary basis, and often it's like a lot of voluntary work sometimes. And we still have more than 400 science dedicated their time, so I guess there is something there that is, pushing others to be part of the membership. So on a early career researcher perspective, what do you think would be like the most benefits of being part of the coalition, and how can you inspire other early career to be part of it?
Thank you for the question, Natalia. So I'd say from my perspectives, there are two aspects. I'm intrinsically motivated to create impact, and that is by providing knowledge. And I think that's what we're all doing, generating knowledge for you to be easily digested. We have a lot of information in the back also, which you're very welcome to take. And that's what we're doing. And what is the benefit for me? I think with all of the Scientists Coalition, I can question my research even more, because we're all questioning each other and trying to provide the best scientific output we can. And that is what helps me in better understanding what are all the different impact categories we'll have to consider, and how can we bring this best together to communicate the information that we are communicating to you. So yeah, we are, I think, about 70 people on the ground from different disciplines, and it's great to engage with this community of the people with the same interest and engaging and working together with the same end goal to end plastic pollution across the full life cycle.
Great, thank you so much for very clear speech to all of you and for very clear insights as well. I think we would like to conclude by giving the permanent secretary the last question. That is like, if you could give one very concrete, brief recommendation to how the scientists can work or what we can do to support the negotiations in the last days.
Thank you. I would start by saying, keep up the amazing work. This is, we know that for us in the Pacific, for seeds in particular, we are traditionally a region that is rich in traditional knowledge, but relatively we have significant gaps in scientific knowledge. So we really recognize that the knowledge systems are in place in tandem with one another. I would also like to say that we are really indebted to the scientific coalition or the scientist coalition for their engagements, all their materials that they have submitted. For someone like me who is a non-scientist, I find it really easy to read the infographics, the publications, because it's not in very scientific jargon. So, and I have a big, I must commend someone in my team, Mr. Andrew Paris, who is a scientist, and he's done so much scientific research on microplastics, so he will bother me to make sure that I read before I come for any of my engagements, and he's always like the man behind the scenes, like trying to ensure that all of the team is well equipped. My advice would be that we should keep being inside those rooms and trying to support the delegations that need it the most. And in future, I think we should start thinking about it strategically, because as we prepare for DEEP conference and COP1, I think that we need to, as a team, as a family, move from wearing the scientist coalition badge to being embedded in the country delegations, so that you can more robustly support the drafting of the interventions that talks about the science in layman terms, to those in the room that discount, that dilute, that tend to deviate from the realities of what's around us. I think strategically, if you see in many other COP meetings, and I'm speaking from experience in my 9 COPs in climate change, I've seen fossil fuel lobbyists wearing party badges in many other country delegations, and they have deterred and destroyed the process with procedural niceties. And I think that with you on our side, we'll be able to advance and block those, and we'll be able to talk on the evidences that we have that's grounded on the realities. And so my advice is, again, as I started, keep up the amazing work and let's continue to be friends and friends for the betterment of this world.
Thank you for this. This ends very in an amazing way, our first panel. So please again put your hands together for amazing speakers. For the second panel, we will move on speaking a little bit more or less about ourselves and motivation and everything else you've heard about the science coalition to move on to science. And for that, I refer to Bethany, which is also coordinator of the Science Coalition. Please, Bethany, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm one of the coordinators together with Tizia and Richard, and we have some of our steering committee in the room here. We had there was a nice transition from our last panelist about the outputs of the Scientist Coalition, and one of our figures is here. This is from one of the outputs that we wrote about the triple planetary crisis and how plastics are central to impacting both biodiversity loss, climate change, and pollution. And in this diagram, you see a very brief summary of some of the mechanisms of how plastics are driving those changes. But in this session, in our second part of our presentations, we're going to give you a little bit of an overview of some of our key messaging and what the science is telling us is important to have in an effective plastics treaty. And I'm going to take the first point myself, and that is about production reduction. We know that we're producing vast amounts of plastics. Last year, it was over 500 million tons, and it's predicted to increase as we move forward into the future. But all of the scientific studies that have been done, all of the modeling studies that have been done, show us that in order to end plastics pollution, as is the goal of Resolution 514, we need to reduce production. This has been shown in reports from the OECD, from Systemic working together with UNEP, in scientific studies by some of our colleagues and others. And we also know from past efforts with policy interventions that demand-side measures are not going to suffice here. That we're going to need to see some binding obligations on production reduction in the treaty if it is to be successful, speaking from scientific evidence pointing in that direction, and that national targets will be necessary to make this binding. Going forward, and looking at how science might inform this process into the future, we're going to need to have frequent assessments and updates on potential targets and how we're going to be basing our decisions on the best available science. And there are a number of different scientific principles we can use to inform this process and understanding how much plastics we need, and that would include looking at essentiality and what products we need to make sure that our societies are functioning and humans can live healthy lives. We can look at ideas like simplification, chemical simplification, and looking at transparency and reporting mechanisms so we know what is being produced and where all of these products and chemicals are going. And this is calling for the need for a subsidiary scientific body within the future treaty so that there can be evidence-based decision-making and that this treaty can be responsive to new emerging science and be responsive to technologies and system shifts that we might see coming into the future. And our next speaker, I do have one more slide actually. I forgot about this one. So this is from another one of our outputs looking at production reduction in the Scientist Coalition. And this is based on some of the numbers that have been put forth on how much production reduction we might need. And you might have heard a number like 40%. And looking at this is showing if we are to reduce production by 1 to 3% per year based on the time span leading up to 2040. And it indicates that this is not going to be enough, that we will continue to see accumulation of plastics in the environment, even if we have this predicted reduction number that has been discussed quite a lot. So this is also available on our homepage if you want to read more about how we did this work. Now turning over to Anja.
PPP is certainly one of the hot topics that the countries are discussing during this week, and chemicals of concern is another one, right? I'm just coming out of Contact Group 1, and we've heard that there is a lot of debate about chemicals of concern, whether they should be included in the treaty or not. strong opposition by some countries, a lot of support by many countries, and we hear a lot of contention about the science in those contact groups as well. And as scientists, I can say it's sometimes very frustrating hearing how science is misused in those discussions for political agendas. Now, contact group 1 is not only a big, chemicals of concern is not only a big issue for the INC, but certainly for many of our members. So many of the scientists that we have in the coalition have done excellent and active research on chemicals of concern and other chemicals in plastic products, in plastic materials, in people, in the environment, looking at their impacts on human health and the environment. And that's really driving many of us, and that's why we are so passionate about feeling that chemicals of concern must be included comprehensively in a treaty, coming from that place of doing active research, finding those chemicals basically everywhere, knowing about the health impacts and the environmental impact of those chemicals. So that's certainly a motivation. You asked before in the panel why scientists are so motivated to join the coalition, and I think that comes from that professional experience with chemicals of concern in plastics. Accordingly, we've been kind of busy producing many outputs on chemicals of concern that are supposed to support member states, especially those that lack technical capacity, with the best available science in those negotiations. And that's something that we've done to really lift the ambitions and include chemicals of concern comprehensively in the treaty. We also had a lot of informal conversations with member states, helping them understand the complexities of that issue, because it is not a simple issue. We're talking about many chemicals, many known hazards, many known risks as well, but we're also talking about many unknowns. So we're trying to share the best science with member states to help them understand and find a good compromise. Now, the science clearly points towards the need for comprehensively addressing chemicals of concern, and that's one big ask that we're having for INC 5. But the science also points towards the need to improve transparency on all those chemicals. We are struggling with knowing which chemicals are used in which plastics, and that's something that we should certainly address in the Plastics Treaty. Finally, looking forward, we believe it's not sufficient to just get rid of the harmful chemicals we know about. But what we really want the treaty to achieve is to simplify the chemical composition of plastics so that there's fewer chemicals in there that are easier to manage from a governmental point of view, but would also make our life much easier. We don't need to deal with thousands of chemicals if we simplify plastics. I think I'll stop there. I'll just take a brief look into the future. We're hopeful that the INC will manage to agree on including chemicals of concern in the treaty. We'll see how it goes, but our members stand ready to support the ongoing process and the implementation with the best available science. Thank you.
And I started off with an image of how plastics are affecting the environment and planetary health, and now we're inviting Megan Deeney, who is one of our early career scientists, to tell us a bit more about how they're affecting human health.
Thanks, Bethany. Thanks so much, everyone, for being here. So we have very strong scientific evidence and scientific consensus that plastics are causing harm to human health across plastics life cycles. And so from raw material extraction through polymer production, product production, through their use, and through all the way to end-of-life management, including their accumulation in the environment, we have a range of different health impacts. And it can be quite a lot to digest in one go, as we've had. So we have produced a policy brief that distills that down into 2 pages, which can be found at the back of the room there. And what we really kind of want to highlight is the importance of keeping human health on the table in the development of the Global Plastics Treaty. And that's for a number of different reasons. But really, we need to consider what strategies are going to be impacting human health. So we know, for example, that reducing plastics production, as we've had, and chemical simplification, eliminating chemicals of concern, are really excellent strategies for reducing all of the health impacts that subsequently cascade throughout plastics life cycles. We also need to consider human health in terms of the responses that we're looking at within the Global Plastics Treaty. So things like mechanical and chemical recycling and the implications for health. These are specific things. And of course, the added layer of urgency, what was once considered really an environmental crisis is now very clearly a global health crisis as well. And we are all impacted by plastics pollution, maybe potentially in different ways, but we are all globally impacted by it. And just to kind of look forwards a little bit as well, what we're really saying, we've heard about the kind of need for this science policy interface and informed by independent scientists, and it's really important that we have health scientists in that body to be able to guide this process and to effectively inform policymakers and to help in terms of very specific things, for example, just developing criteria for safety and hazards that can be applied globally and systematically to chemicals, polymers, and products. And very importantly, to be able to look at ways that we can reduce and remove plastics whilst protecting essential functions for human health. And if there are essential functions, then looking at what are the alternatives and substitutes that we can use, and that includes different materials, potentially alternatives to plastics, but also different technologies, different systems, and we really need to make sure that we're evaluating those very comprehensively, not only against their environmental, economic and social concerns, but also in terms of their human health impact, so that we can be effective in removing plastic pollution, but also in mitigating any trade-offs for human health. So thank you very much, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Essentiality, chemical simplification, the importance of plastics, but the need to use them in a safer and more sustainable way. So I'm going to invite up our next speaker, Dr. Jane Munke, who's one of not our early career scientists. She's very knowledgeable and has many years of experience. Brilliant woman, welcome.
That was the nicest way of saying you're so old. Okay, hi everyone. Thank you for being here. Wow, what a crowd. So this is obviously going to be a really, really important issue. What is safe? And we could get all philosophical talking about that. We don't have time for that. I have 2 minutes, as Bethany's reminding me. So this is actually not part of the Scientist Coalition output. We started working on safe and sustainable production and consumption in the Scientist Coalition, but you can watch that space. We'll have something ready hopefully soon. This output that I want to show you here, this vision for safer food contact materials, is something that a whole bunch of people here in the room worked on jointly. A concept, what we need to be testing. Because right now, when we test chemicals, it's completely feel-good. We're doing something for the sake of doing something. It's not relevant, and it's not really scientifically robust. That's the bad news here. What we can do when we join our forces, and I mean not just the science, but also industry stakeholders, like our friends from the Ocean Plastic Leadership Network, OPLN, right? And the business community, policymakers, and so on, we can come up with ways how to determine, maybe not if a material is safe, but that it's less hazardous. What we're putting on the market right now is hazardous. So that's just one little flavor of where we're going. We need to test chemicals for how they impact human health, and not just cancer, but cardiovascular disease, reproductive disorders, infertility, neurological impacts, metabolic disease, and so on. So that's our vision. And then the other question is, what is sustainable? And here, 2 points are really important. First of all, when we talk about sustainable, we have to acknowledge the 3 pillars of sustainability, which are economic, environmental, and social sustainability. And all 3 of those need to be looked at. So we need quite a holistic way of looking at the issue. We need science-based criteria here also. And we can look at different levels. We can look at the systemic level. We can look at the value chain level. We can look at the individual organizations that are operating in the space. And we can look at the product level. And all of those 4 levels will require different criteria, will require different approaches. But what boils down at the end of the day, doing that analysis, which we've done, 3 things really matter. First of all, is a plastic product essential for health, safety, and the functioning of society? Secondly, we look at the full life cycle, all life stages. We can't just look at one life stage, upstream, downstream, the use. We have to look at all of them. And the third one is transparency. We need to know, for example, where is the feedstock from? If it's fossil carbon, by definition, well, it's not really sustainable. But you knew that, right? If it contains hazardous chemicals, it's probably also not sustainable. So these are the things we're looking at. And I know Bethany wants me to stop. So I'll come to my point. We have to collaborate. Scientists sometimes think we know everything, we don't. We're dependent on input from other stakeholders, so please talk to us, work with us, support us. One such collaboration, again, not a Science Coalition tool, but an FBF tool, Food Packaging Forum tool, with many other stakeholders like Plastic Pollution Coalition, Diana's here, many others. The Understanding Packaging Scorecard, where we look at environmental impacts of different packaging choices, and we also look at chemicals. And last point, really important that we avoid regrettable substitutions. Let's not move from plastic to some solution that becomes tomorrow's problem. Science can help with that. We know how to do that, so please talk to us. Thank you so much.
One more of the key elements that we've been discussing within the Scientist Coalition, and that is Dr. Suzanne Brander, who's going to speak to us about transparency, which I'm sure you'll recognize because it's a word we've all used. Come on up.
Hi everyone, so great to see so many people here today. I'm Suzanne Brander from Oregon State University, and I know that some of our other speakers today have already mentioned transparency, and the reason for that is because it is such a critical issue to the success of a treaty, or just the success of tracking chemicals and pollutants in the environment, period. This has been an issue for years. So it's really a cross-cutting issue, as you can see, for monitoring, for regulating chemicals, and it's greatly needed for successful implementation. And really the reason for that is this figure that I've posted at the top here. This is the plastics value chain, and as you can see, there are many players, there are many steps. There are many opportunities to lose track of what's happening or where something has gone. And so really having clarity and regulating and having the ability to identify where a chemical has ended up, or when you get to the end of the chain and you have a product that might contain 500 chemicals and you don't know what any of them are, that's really the situation we're dealing with today. So criteria for safety and sustainability and essentiality, so the essential use concept, which a lot of us have been thinking about while in CG1 today, and transparency are distinct yet really overlapping requirements of implementing the treaty, and also regulating existing chemicals in use. And so transparency and traceability and the ability to track and ensure that all of these different actors, from the petrochemical producers, so starting with extraction, all the way to distribution of that product, to waste collection and treatment. How do you know how to treat something if you don't know what's in it, right? Those are all really important steps in this process. So complying is really critical to reducing the impact of plastics, both from an environmental perspective and also, of course, from a human health perspective. So there are some examples of this in action already. So we're, as a coalition, we'd love to see mandatory standards along with certifications, labeling requirements, and then a monitoring system for tracking. The EU in 2024 has just implemented digital product passports, and so that's just rolling out. But that's basically an ability to barcode a product so you know what's in it and you're able to track it from production through disposal. So seeing something like that would kind of be a dream come true. We'll keep our fingers crossed. Thank you.
Okay, so we're all that and more. We have some of our outputs at the back of the room, and later in the presentation we're going to show you a QR code that will link you to all of our outputs and documents so you can read more. And of course you're welcome to ask any of us questions. And with that, we're going to end with a third and final session. So I'm going to pass the microphone back to our two hosts.
Thank you, Bethany, and thank you so much to all our speakers for those brief introductions. If they were too brief, yes, we have the policy briefs at the back. Our members are around, they're happy to speak, as you just heard. And we daily have our little Ask a Scientist pop-up, so if you see the roll-up that we have outside around with 3 people standing in front of it, then those are very available for you to ask your questions.
So now moving to speak a little bit about the future of the science and the global plastics treaty, I would like to invite our next panelist, Research, Thompson, Marina Fernandez, Marta Messina, and Patricia Rubia. Please, your seats. I would like to start with you, Richard. Since we're looking into the future, I think we can use a little bit of some of your decades of experience with plastic pollution research. And I think being in the last round of finally having a global mandate for tackling plastic pollution must be very special for you in this. I would like to if you could share what are your hopes for this week regarding the plastic pollution, please.
Yeah, thank you. It's interesting you used the word special. I think UNEA 514 was a very special moment, and it sets out a very clear mandate to me in incredibly concise and clear words as to exactly what we need to do for the sake of our planet and all who live on it to end plastic pollution. Regrettably, and I've had the fortune to attend most of the INC sessions, what I see is a kind of regrettable substitution for the way that some member states choose to interpret that resolution. Of course, the devil's in the detail, but we all need to work together in the United Nations, for the sake of the planet. And those regrettable substitutions are one thing, and I think that's something that the science can hope to bring clarity on. But even worse is, and I'm glad that I'm not a diplomat or a negotiator or trying to chair this session, as I sometimes have to chair rounds of students. But I see the squandering of the precious time we've got here by some member states, and that is immensely frustrating as a scientist who's spent the last 40 years gathering some of the evidence of harm and tried to bring it to this body, that I literally see the wasting of time. So yeah, 514 was special. I hope that at the end of this week of negotiations, I will feel we've come out with a treaty that is just as special as the mandate set us on a path to deliver. At the moment, I'm unsure, but I remain hopeful.
Thank you. In the last panel, we saw a bunch of scientific information that we develop science policy briefs about it, and one of those is about the science policy interface, which you are the main author of this science policy brief. And so speaking about the importance of the science policy interface, in this policy brief, we mentioned the importance of independent science policy interface for the treaty. So can you speak a little bit about why it's important to have this independence?
Yeah, I think it's really key that we've got that independent, impartial evidence because, otherwise, of course, different member states are going to have different national positions, different commercial interests are going to have different positions. And so without that independent science body to guide us on the way forward, what we're going to see is more and more of what we've seen so far, which is kind of inefficient ping pong game of member states cherry picking the information that happens to suit their particular national interests. And that's why the science body needs to produce the robust independent evidence that's free of those conflict of interests. It's not just for the sake of the planet, it's for the efficiency of the negotiations that we can really got the luxury of time to keep mudslinging back and forth different cherry picked pieces of information that suit our individual positions, and that's why the independence is key in my view.
Thank you, Richard. I would like to go over to Marina. You have been studying endocrine disrupting chemicals for quite some time, and you have also been following the negotiations closely, both from the Scientist Coalition as a former steering committee member, but also for the Endocrine Society. And as we're getting closer to the end of the negotiations, what are your concerns, your main concerns with the few days that we have left?
So we've been telling all the delegations, or most of the delegations that we spoke with, that basically when we talk about plastics, we're talking about chemicals. We've been saying that since the beginning, since INC 1. Even some of my colleagues, Leo has been saying from before. So hearing that it's not in the mandate of the resolution, chemicals, it's like very surprising, because plastics are made of chemicals. If you want to regulate plastics, you have to regulate chemicals. And many of these chemicals are, as we already know, endocrine-disrupting chemicals, and they are harmful. They are carcinogenic. They are harmful for human health. So if you want to have a treaty that is effective in protecting human health and the environment, you definitely have to regulate those things. So hearing it again, it feels like a bit frustrating, if I have to say that.
Thank you. We understand that, and we know that there is a lot of stake for many.
Thank you, Marina. We are also very lucky to have Marta Piscina with us today. Marta is the CEO of the Ocean Plastic Leadership Network. Marta, between INC 4 and INC 5, OBLN have conducted some important work in partnership with some of scientists from the Science Coalition. Could you tell us a little bit about this work, please?
Yes, absolutely. So actually, at INC 4 in Ottawa, the Scientist Coalition has made a call for multi-stakeholder engagement in development of criteria for the treaty. And just leave it criteria at large, because the topic is very complex. I'll get to that in a second. So OBLN, we're a neutral capacity organization and secretariat. We do not take positions, but we work with over 400 organizations and also member states all around the world. So we took that opportunity to work together with the Scientist Coalition, as well as Business Coalition and many other stakeholders, to collaborate on what those criteria actually could be, and also bring forward this need to the attention of member states at INC 5. So, in result, we ended up with a very large-scale project, really looking deeply at some of the different complex issues inside of across the full life cycle of plastic. And with the help of the Scientist Coalition, we're able to streamline some of this and really understand what is critical today. So this treaty has been a roller coaster of ambition. I think for a lot of us, it feels like one day we're up, another day we're going down, and I think it's at this point quite emotional for a lot of people to experience this and be here. So I had an opportunity to work with both Richard and Marina contributing to this project. And in a nutshell, the areas of consensus and alignment that we saw are around safety. And I think that is a really important topic that has been covered by the scientists today. We want to bring this forward again, that both private sector, among some member states, as well as many others, NGO scientists, agree that we need safety criteria. We have to make sure that this is part of the discussion. And obviously, without chemicals of concern, how are we discussing safety? This makes no sense for any logical being. So another point that I want to make is we cannot identify safe and sustainable solutions without data. If you don't report correctly, do not expect to be considered a safe and sustainable solution. So this treaty presents a unique opportunity for us to establish transparency baseline frameworks for both safety and sustainability to ensure that we can identify what the future can hold for us that's positive. And I think I'll stop there. There's a lot more. My team is over here. So if you didn't receive our document because we've been sharing it, please reach out. We'd love to share it with you.
Thank you so much, and you partly covered my question on this as well, but you've talked about the, I think, our knowledge gaps and so on, but how would you foresee that the plastic treaty should set up how it works with science? Do you have any, something additional to mention on that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, yeah, okay, here we go. Absolutely. I mean, there was a lot of discussion about the independent scientific body being a part of the solution. I think there are also discussions taking place right now about how this works in practice, how each country can be helped, or how can we bridge this gap, right? So maybe there's a level of harmonization of criteria, followed with a standard that the body can then take on and evaluate. There are ideas out there, but we think the scientific independent body is definitely a critical part of this process, and the rest obviously has to be figured out. There's a lot of pieces on the table today. So the way I'm looking at the treaty today, I think I'm trying not to just be hopeful and idealistic about what's coming for us. I think a lot of us are maybe not feeling that energy at the moment, but I think if we can stick to the agenda of we have to protect environmental and human health, and this is why we're here, how this got started to some extent, and we've learned a lot more along the way, then we have an opportunity for something productive that can work for everyone.
Super, thank you so much, Mara. And I think our members have also very much enjoyed working with OPLM in the time between these two IMCs, and we hope that will continue.
Yeah, absolutely. Pachi, with you now. You're the representative of early career scientists at the Science Coalition, and it's your second year on this role, so you're kind of consider your experienced member, I guess, in the Science Coalition. And looking into the future, how do you think that our generation can benefit from this treaty? What should we aim for it?
That's a really interesting question, and I would like to answer it in two folds. First, I would like to get a little bit personal because I'm knowledgeable about what plastic pollution and how plastic pollution have an effect on human health thanks to the work of my friends, Marina being one of them. And I'm a woman in reproductive age, trying to, planning now to have my own family soon. And I'm really worried about the chemicals that are on plastic. So for me, if I would have a magic wand and I could do what science says that it's correct for this treaty, I would have transparency and essentiality at the forefront. And if chemicals, materials, and products are not safe and has an essential use, maybe we should not have them. Because, and Jane was telling us this yesterday, pregnant woman and children are the most affected by the endocrine disruptor chemicals. And second of all, and Ricardo already mentioned about this, when it comes to early career professionals, we have grown up in globalization with this globalized world. And one of the positive things that come with this is that we are connected. We have learned how to look at environmental problems with a very interdisciplinary way. Most of us speak different languages. That let us connect with people in a different ways as well. So we look into, whatever we look at environmental issues, we look at the social and the ecological and how they have impact together. And if this treaty, we wish that we have a subsidiary body for the science policy, as a subsidiary science policy body, and I think that we should have that in which early career professionals are included, because if not, I worry that these very necessary skills that we have will not present at the table when the treaty is implementable.
Thank you. I think that's really clear.
Thank you so much. We're getting towards the end, but Marina, sometimes when we discuss the membership of the Scientist Coalition, we recognize that it's quite difficult for researchers from developing countries to become a member because access to resources to fund their research is scarce, and they often depend on funding from industry. And we have very strict requirements for becoming a member of the Scientist Coalition. So if your work is funded by the plastics industry, you cannot become a member. So I was wondering if you could say a little bit about how you foresee that what needs to change for independent science in developing countries also to contribute to the implementation of the Plastics Treaty?
That's a great question. And not only for independent science, I would say, I mean, we need to have international cooperation for sure. And although, I mean, also access to external funds would be great in order for us to continue our research. But also doing the studies that need to be done in order to monitor the effectiveness of the treaty will need international cooperation, because some of these studies need global scale. We will need a lot of funds to do biomonitoring, for instance. And even if we have the human capacity or the technical capacity in our countries, but we don't have the money to carry them out, it will be very complicated. And many of the developing countries have the human and technological capacity, but don't have the resources to do these studies. Another thing I will say is that this treaty is being negotiated globally, but will have to be implemented locally. So not only we will need to have international cooperation, but also regional and national cooperation. So scientists, anywhere they are, and should be contacting their own governments, their own countries, because once this thing is into place, we will need to have a legislation changed in our countries. And we will need to help our legislators to know what to do. And that is something that we can start doing now. We don't have to wait until the treaty is into place. So those are my two things, and I'm hopeful that that will happen when we have this agreement. And I hope we will have this agreement soon.
Thank you, Marina. Thanks for bringing this perspective of the developing countries. I think it's really, really important for the implementation of the treaty to have a just implementation of the treaty. Richard, I started asking you about your hopes for the week, and I'd like to listen from you. What are your expectations for the work of the Science Coalition in the next steps of the Global Plastics Treaty?
Okay, well, it's interesting. We've had speakers bring a range of different perspectives to this, but one recurrent feature of all of that is, I think, the need for a subsidiary body that will bring accurate, independent science to help us chart the way forward in all of this. And I think, to me, it's really, essential that there's a mandate for such a body in the treaty, and that is then established swiftly. So let's assume that that's where we end up. Of course, we might not end up there, but to me, that is going to be essential if we're going to have a successful treaty, that it's guided by independent science. So we've grown from a handful of members, as we heard at the start, to now 400 members in 60 countries, covering every discipline of plastic pollution, to the environment, to society, legal aspects. We are here to support the negotiations, the negotiators, and ultimately we'll be here to support the members of that science body in the future. So that remains, our role remains the same. I mean, we are in this really as scientists bringing evidence for a safer and more sustainable use of plastics so that we can see the benefits without the current exponential harm. And so that, to me, that role remains, but rather than guiding member states directly, we would hopefully work with that science body to continue to provide that evidence. Because it is quite a wicked problem that involves multiple disciplines. Let's not imagine this is a simple challenge. The science is telling us we need to act. And I believe that this is an environmental problem that we can absolutely solve. And the reason that I keep coming back to that tells me we can do that with the science is because many of the other environmental challenges that I've worked on in my career, it's something us humans want that is directly and proportionately causing the damage. If we all want to live in a city by the coastline, that directly and proportionately takes away the natural habitat and the homes for all the species that once lived there, and it's almost unavoidable. If we want to go fishing for the protein, of course we want to try and do it sustainably. But if I catch 1,000 fish in the morning, that afternoon there are 1,000 fish less. But in my view, with plastics, there is a way that we can use plastics in a far more safer and sustainable way that we can get the benefits of plastic without the unintended consequences. So it's about the science guiding us to a more responsible use of plastics than we've had to date. And that's the future that I foresee. And that's what gives me hope. You look at, some people say, is it aligned with the tobacco industries and the legislation on tobacco? Well, we're all pretty clear there's no safe way to smoke cigarettes now. But that's not the same for plastics. It's about guiding us away. And I'd emphasize this as my final word. I can see Christopher's pacing over here. We have to start using plastics more responsibly than we have, because I've seen very little evidence of safety and sustainability in the way that we're producing, using and disposing plastics over the last 60 years. So that's what we've got to do. And we've got the science body to help us. We've got the scientists amongst us here to do that. And I hope that going forward, we'll have a science body to work with the member states to help to deliver the treaty that I hope a hammer goes down on, that we can all be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. And it's always a pleasure to listen to your guidance. And we're so happy to have all our members who have been speaking here today with us. I would like to give Patty the final say of this session and our seminar today. And our challenge to you is to briefly tell us where do you see the Scientist Coalition and what will it look like in 5 years from now?
Not a little one. First of all, please listen to science and scientists that are here. Even please, I don't know how to say this in another way, but I see the Scientist Coalition in the next 5 years. First of all, I hope they are working in this subsidiary science policy body for the Plastics Treaty, because the work doesn't finish this week. This is a long run. We are going to be doing a marathon, and we are an extremely committed group of scientists and becoming friends. I hope that we keep working, maybe not as hard, because all of the work we are doing is for free and on our free time. But what I would like to see is to grow, not only geographically, but have the possibility of fostering a space for different scientists from different backgrounds and different knowledge systems to be working together with us, but with not including a burden to their work that they already have. Because many of the people say but the Scientist Coalition is very white. And sometimes I say yes, but it's also because we have the privilege to have a more or less stable job. We cannot ask other scientists that are already with a big burden and sometimes even tokenizing. We cannot ask people to work for free. So I really hope that in 5 years we can keep working, but have a space good for everyone and not have to work so much for free.
Thank you, Patty. Very clear words. Please join us in a round of applause for our excellent speakers. Thank you everyone again for joining us. As mentioned, we have a lot of policy briefs and other materials at the back of the room. We would also like to thank Rob Raston and the University of Edinburgh for allowing us to use this conference room. We need to vacate it because there's going to be a new session here very soon. And we would like to thank the Norwegian Agency for Development Cooperation for providing the funds also to organize the event today. Thank you so much.